Hello everybody and welcome to the fourth lesson of the iGCSE Biology 9-1 course. This video is going to cover the following specification point, the levels of organization. Now, this video is tailored for the digestible iGCSE course and preparing you for its exam. However, if you're studying under another exam board like AQA or Cambridge, you'll probably still find this video useful. So, without further ado, let's dive in. So, in the previous videos, we looked at cells and the cell structure of animals, plants, and the rest of the kingdoms of life. We mentioned that cells were the building blocks of life and that some organisms are multicellular, meaning they contain many cells. Now, when an organism contains a lot of cells, these many cells need some form of organization, and that's what we're going to look at today, the different levels of organization in living organisms. There's 5 levels of organization, which are organelles, cells, tissues, organs, and organ systems. Let's look at organelles first. We've talked about these in previous videos, but they are subcellular structures which are specialized to carry out specific functions or jobs in the cell. You can see the structure of animal and plant cells on the screen now, with all their organelles labeled. A common organelle in both is the nucleus, and its particular function is to contain the cell's genetic material that controls the cell's activities. Or we could also talk about the mitochondria, also in both plant and animal cells. It's the site of aerobic respiration, or where most of the reactions for aerobic respiration happen. Of course, there's also the organelles that are strictly unique to plant cells, the chloroplasts, permanent vacuole, and the cell wall. The next level of organization after organelles are cells. Cells are the smallest units that make up a living organism. We previously looked at prokaryotes and eukaryotes, and how eukaryotic cells are complex and prokaryotic cells are smaller and simpler. You've got to know that the majority of cells will have features which give them different functions within an organism. For example, in humans like us, not all of our cells are the exact same. The cells in many multicellular animals or plants are what we call specialized cells. They are specialized to perform different functions, and as a result, they've got all these different features, like a certain shape or a substance inside them that help them in doing this specific function. Now, I talk about these specialized cells in our own video, which you can check out after this one, but that's about all you've got to know about them for now. Because a tissue is a group of similar cells that work together to carry out a particular function. How does this relate? Here's an example. Your muscles are made up of muscle tissue, which you can see on the screen, and that muscle tissue enables them to move. And that muscle tissue is made up of specialized muscle cells that are able to contract. That's all there is to it, really. A tissue is a group of similar cells, in this case muscle cells, that work together to perform some kind of function, which would be the movement of your arms or wherever the muscle might be here. Another example of this is nervous tissue. And nervous tissue is made up of neurons or nerve cells, carrying information around your body as electrical impulses. You also need to know that in plants, there's also the xylem tissue for transporting water and mineral salts, and the phloem tissue for transporting sucrose and amino acids. Those are all actually things we've got separate videos about, but as long as you're aware of what tissues are, you should be fine for now. Next, we move on to organs, which, conveniently enough, are a group of different tissues that work together to perform a specific function. It's basically the same as the last definition, with the only difference being that it's a group of tissues and that they're different tissues. A great example of where tissues work together in an organ is the stomach. You can see in the diagram you've got, for example, epithelial tissues that cover the outside of the stomach, and muscular tissues which contract to move the wall of the stomach so they can churn the food inside the stomach up. Then we've also got glandular tissues, and these tissues produce acid and enzymes that help digest your food, and inner epithelial tissues to cover the inside of the stomach. Basically, you've got all sorts of tissues that make it all up, and they're working together to make sure that food in your stomach gets digested. That's the specific function they're working towards. The same goes for leaves and plants too, since they're one of the plant's organs. And finally, the most complex level of organization is the organ system. Different organs work together to form organ systems, and each system has specific functions. There's quite a few of these organ systems. For example, the digestive system in mammals, which is made up of organs like the stomach, large intestine, pancreas, and liver. There's also the circulatory, reproductive, or nervous systems in your body, all of which we study later. Plants actually have 2 organ systems as well. The shoot organ system, which is made of leaves, stems, buds, fruits, and flowers, And there's also the root organ system. Usually all the different parts of the plant are underground instead of above ground. It's really good to be familiar with all of these different organ systems in animals and plants, since they're definitely something you could be asked about. We'll look a little bit more on that in the past paper section though. As always, for a brief review, this table summarizes all of the different levels of organization and the key definitions you'll need to know for your exam. Pause the video and make sure you're comfortable with these definitions before you move on. Now it's time to consolidate with some questions testing your understanding of the content and prepare you for the exam technique by trying a few past paper questions. Have a go at this first question. Now this one might have been a little confusing, but the correct answer here is B, since the skin is actually one of your organs. And we know that because the skin itself is made of many different tissues working together. There's layers to your skin. There's a lot of different tissues working together to perform a specific function, so that makes the skin an organ. Now try this next question. The correct answer here is A, since 4 is a plant cell, specifically a root hair cell, making it the smallest one here, since cells are microscopic. And the one bigger than it is the tissue number 2, followed by the root system, which is pictured in 3, and finally the entire organism, which is the tree in picture number 1. Next, try this question. The correct answer here is C, since the diagram shows a circulatory system. You can tell by taking a look at the heart and all the blood vessels, and the circulatory system is an organ system, so option C checks out. And now the last question before we move on, have a go at this. The correct answer here is C, since the cell is the simplest level of organization here, followed by the heart muscle tissue, which is made up of many different cells, then the heart itself, which is an organ, and finally the most complex part here is the circulatory system, so option C checks out. Now we're going to move on to some past paper questions. These are questions I've taken from real past papers, and they're the kinds of questions you're likely to be asked about this topic in your exam. So try this first question. Here is my answer to it, and here is the mark scheme. Like you saw in my answer, the key details you've got to include here is that the different tissues are working together to do a specific function. You can see the word tissue is underlined there, and that just means it's an exam keyword. So you must include it in your answer to score the mark. Always be on the lookout for those keywords or those words in bold. You do need those words and you need to spell them right to get that mark. Have a go at this next question now. Here's my answer to it, and here's the mark scheme. The first part of the question is fairly straightforward. We did a question just like it, so we can see it's a repeat. And the crucial thing here is that a lot of questions are commonly repeated in GCSE papers. So by practicing these questions, you're guaranteeing that you score those marks if you come across the same question in your exam. For more on that, you can check my video on those kinds of commonly asked questions that have repeatedly come up every year. I go through them and I give you mark scheme solutions and how to solve those questions. Anyways, for the next part, the only labeled organ in the circulatory system was the heart, as you can see. And for the 3 systems, you really could have named any. I named the 3 that I covered in this video, but there is also the skeletal system, as you can see. Some of the rat's bones are there, and the endocrine system, which is the hormonal system, the system that releases hormones in your body. And finally, for that last part, again, you could have named any system that wasn't there. I chose the reproductive system, but the immune system could also work. Key takeaway here is, as always, any valid answer will get you the marks. Now try this very last question. Here's how I answered it, and here's the mark scheme. We know the nucleus is an organelle, and the circulatory system is an organ system. Chloroplasts are also organelles, leaves are organs, and bulbs might have actually been a tricky one. But if you don't know what bulbs are, I mentioned them earlier, and they're basically a sort of underground stem that a plant makes to store carbohydrates and a few other things, making them also organs for those plants, since it's a stem, which we know is an organ. For the next part, the red blood cell is actually the smallest. We talk about this in our Specialized Cells video, but white blood cells are in fact larger than red blood cells. And the eye is obviously an organ that's bigger than both of those, and the kidney is actually smaller than the liver. So that makes the liver the largest one here. And with that, we have reached the end of today's video. If you found this video useful, drop a like, subscribe, and share to support my channel and help more students. For more lessons, check out my iGCSE Excel biology playlist you can see on screen, and feel free to comment down below or reach out via email if you have any questions. That's all for this lesson. Have a nice day.